12 years. That's how long I had been the operations manager at Hartfield Manufacturing, managing the complex logistics, inventory systems, and production schedules that kept a $50 million company running smoothly. 12 years of building processes, training teams, and creating the kind of operational excellence that made everything look effortless to the people who never had to think about it. My name is Robert Miller, and until 2 weeks ago, I was the backbone of daily operations at Hartfield Manufacturing, a mid-sized company that produced specialized automotive parts for major car manufacturers. I had streamlined their supply chain, implemented inventory management systems, and built relationships with suppliers that saved the company millions of dollars annually. But according to Charles Hartfield, the founder and CEO, I deserved to rest, and his nephew Tyler would handle everything just fine. Ever been pushed out for someone's unqualified relative? Watched nepotism destroy what you spent years building? Leave it in the comments. What happened when this 22-year-old tried to run my operation will blow your mind. The meeting that changed my career happened on a Thursday afternoon in March. Charles had asked me to come to his office to discuss some exciting changes coming to the company. Robert, you've been absolutely essential to this company's success, Charles began, using the tone that every experienced manager recognizes as corporate doublespeak. Your dedication over the past 12 years has been remarkable. Past tense. Had been essential, not currently essential. Thank you, Charles, I appreciate that. Are we discussing my annual review, or is this about the expansion plans we've been developing? Actually, Robert, I want to talk to you about succession planning. You've been carrying a heavy load for a long time, and I think you deserve the opportunity to step back and enjoy a less stressful role. Less stressful role. Corporate code for we're demoting you. Charles, I'm not looking to step back. I'm 45 years old, I'm at the peak of my abilities, and I love what I do. Our operations are running better than they ever have. That's exactly why this is such a great opportunity. You've built such excellent systems that they practically run themselves, which means we can transition your responsibilities to someone with fresh energy and new ideas. Fresh energy and new ideas. The eternal corporate excuse for replacing experienced employees with cheaper, less qualified alternatives. And who did you have in mind for this transition? Charles's face lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that immediately made me nervous. My nephew Tyler just graduated from business school at Northwestern. He's brilliant, he's eager to prove himself, and he's been studying our industry extensively. I think he'd be perfect to take over your day-to-day operational responsibilities. Tyler Hartfield. I knew the name because Charles mentioned his nephew frequently, usually in the context of how proud he was of the young man's academic achievements and how excited he was to bring fresh blood into the family business. Tyler was 22 years old, had never worked in manufacturing, and had spent the previous summer interning at a consulting firm where he had apparently impressed everyone with his PowerPoint presentations and strategic thinking. Charles, with respect, managing operations isn't something you can learn from business school textbooks. These systems are complex, our supplier relationships are delicate, and our production schedules require constant adjustment based on customer demand fluctuations. Robert, I understand your concerns, but Tyler is extremely intelligent and highly motivated. He'll pick up the operational details quickly, and he brings valuable perspectives on process optimization and efficiency improvements. Process optimization and efficiency improvements, as if 12 years of operational refinement hadn't already optimized our processes. What about knowledge transfer? These systems have hundreds of interdependencies that aren't documented anywhere. It would take months to properly train someone on all the nuances of how our operations work. Tyler will have access to all your documentation, and he can reach out to you if he has questions during the transition period. All my documentation. Charles seemed to think that 12 years of operational expertise could be captured in procedure manuals and flowcharts. Charles, documentation only covers the basics. There are supplier relationships, seasonal patterns, production quirks, and emergency procedures that can only be learned through experience. Robert, I'm confident that Tyler can handle any challenges that arise. He's very resourceful and has excellent problem-solving skills. Excellent problem-solving skills developed during 2 years of case studies and group projects. And what would my role be in this new structure? We're creating a senior advisor position for you. You'd be available to consult on strategic issues and provide guidance when needed. but you'd be freed from the day-to-day operational demands. Senior advisor, a meaningless title with no real responsibilities, designed to make my demotion sound like a promotion. Charles, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in being pushed aside to make room for your nephew. If you want him to learn operations, I'd be happy to mentor him as part of my team, but I'm not ready to step down from a role I excel at. Charles's expression shifted from enthusiastic to something colder and more determined. Robert, I understand this isn't what you were expecting, but this decision has already been made. Tyler starts Monday, and I need you to spend next week getting him up to speed on our core operations. Already been made. Charles wasn't asking for my input or negotiating terms. He was informing me that I had been replaced by his nephew, regardless of qualifications or experience. And if I refused to cooperate with this transition, then you'd be choosing to make this difficult for everyone involved. Robert, you've been a valued employee, and I'd like this transition to be smooth and professional. Valued employee. Past tense again. I looked at Charles, this man I had worked with for 12 years, whose company I had helped grow from $20 million to $50 million in annual revenue, and I realized that loyalty meant nothing when family nepotism was involved. Fine, Charles. I'll train Tyler next week, but I want it on record that I believe this transition is premature and potentially damaging to our operational efficiency. Your concerns are noted, Robert. I'm confident that everything will work out well for everyone. Tyler Hartfield arrived on Monday morning wearing a $2,000 suit, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having been seriously challenged or held accountable for real-world results. Uncle Charles has told me so much about you, Robert. I'm really excited to learn from your experience and bring some fresh perspectives to our operations. Fresh perspectives. The phrase that every experienced manager learns to dread. Tyler, I'm happy to show you how our systems work, but I should mention that operations management is quite complex. It's taken me 12 years to optimize these processes, and there are a lot of nuances that aren't immediately obvious. Oh, I'm sure I'll pick it up quickly. I studied operations management extensively in business school, and I've been analyzing your processes from a theoretical perspective. I think there might be some opportunities for improvement. Opportunities for improvement. Based on theoretical analysis of processes he had never actually executed, I spent the next 5 days walking Tyler through our operations. I showed him our inventory management system, our supplier relationships, our production scheduling processes, and our quality control procedures. Tyler took notes on his iPad, asked questions that demonstrated he understood the concepts but missed the practical complexities, and frequently made suggestions for optimizations that would have created chaos if implemented. This inventory tracking system seems pretty outdated, Tyler said, as I explained our custom database that managed 15,000 different parts across multiple warehouses. Have you considered migrating to a cloud-based ERP solution? Tyler, we built this system specifically for our needs over several years. It integrates with our suppliers' systems, our production equipment, and our quality control processes. Migrating to a different platform would take months and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. But cloud-based solutions offer so much more functionality and scalability. I think we're probably limiting our growth potential by sticking with legacy systems. Legacy systems. Our custom-built, highly optimized operational infrastructure was legacy because it wasn't purchased from a software vendor. Tyler, these systems process over $50 million in annual transactions with 99.8% accuracy. They're not broken, so they don't need to be fixed. Robert, just because something works doesn't mean it's optimal. Sometimes you need to disrupt your own processes to achieve breakthrough improvements. Disrupt your own processes. The kind of advice that sounds profound in a business school classroom, but catastrophic in a real manufacturing environment. By Friday afternoon, I had shown Tyler everything I could in 5 days. He seemed confident that he understood our operations, but I could see the gaps in his knowledge, the assumptions he was making, and the complexities he was underestimating. Tyler, our operations are more complex than they appear on the surface. If you run into any issues, especially during our peak production periods, please don't hesitate to call me. Thanks, Robert, but I think I have a pretty good handle on everything. The processes are actually more straightforward than I expected, and I see several opportunities to streamline and optimize. Straightforward. Our multi-million-dollar manufacturing operation that supplied parts to Ford, GM, and Toyota was straightforward. If you say so, good luck. I cleaned out my office that Friday evening, said goodbye to colleagues who seemed confused and concerned about the management change, and walked away from 12 years of building something I was proud of. But I wasn't angry. I was curious about how long it would take for Tyler to discover that managing operations required more than theoretical knowledge and fresh perspectives. I didn't have to wait long. The first call came on Wednesday morning of Tyler's second week. "Robert, this is Jennifer from accounting. Tyler asked me to call you because we're having some issues with the monthly inventory reports." Jennifer was our senior accountant, a detail-oriented professional who had been with the company for 8 years and understood our financial systems better than anyone. "What kind of issues, Jennifer?" "Well, Tyler tried to run the monthly inventory reconciliation, but the reports aren't generating correctly. The data seems to be corrupted or incomplete, and our inventory values are showing huge discrepancies." I almost smiled. The monthly inventory reconciliation was one of those processes that looked simple in the documentation, but required understanding dozens of system interdependencies and data validation procedures. Did Tyler follow the step-by-step procedures I documented? He tried, but something went wrong during the data extraction phase. Now the system is showing negative inventory for several major part categories, and Tyler can't figure out how to reset the calculations. Negative inventory. Tyler had somehow managed to corrupt our inventory data by skipping critical validation steps during the reporting process. "Jennifer, this is a complex issue that requires someone with deep knowledge of our inventory architecture. Has Tyler been able to identify what went wrong?" "He's been working on it for 2 days, but he called me this morning and said he thinks we might need external help." External help. After 1 week of being the fresh perspective our operations needed, Tyler was already admitting that he was in over his head. "Jennifer, I'd be happy to help, but I'm no longer an employee of Hartfield Manufacturing. If Charles wants my assistance, he'll need to engage me as a consultant." "What does that mean?" "It means I'll need a consulting contract with appropriate compensation for emergency system recovery work." The second call came 2 hours later, this time from Tyler himself. "Robert, thank God you're available. We have a major situation here and I could really use your help." "What kind of situation, Tyler?" "The inventory system is completely messed up. Our production schedules are showing errors, and our suppliers are calling because their automatic ordering systems are receiving bad data from our databases. Our suppliers' automatic ordering systems were integrated with our inventory management system, so Tyler's data corruption had cascaded into our entire supply chain." "Tyler, this sounds like a complex technical issue. Have you been able to identify the root cause?" "I think it started when I tried to optimize the monthly reporting process. I made some adjustments to improve efficiency, but now everything is showing incorrect numbers." Adjustments to improve efficiency. Tyler had decided to optimize processes that were working perfectly, without understanding how they integrated with other systems. "What kind of adjustments did you make?" "I modified some of the database queries to eliminate what looked like redundant calculations, but now the reports aren't matching our physical inventory counts, and I can't figure out how to fix it." Modified database queries. Tyler had edited custom SQL code without understanding what the redundant calculations were actually doing. "Tyler, those calculations aren't redundant. They're data validation routines that ensure accuracy across multiple inventory tracking methods. By removing them, you've broken the integrity of our entire inventory management system." "Oh, can you help me fix it?" "Tyler, I'd be happy to help, but I'm no longer an employee. If you want my assistance, you'll need to arrange a consulting contract through Charles." "What would that involve?" "You'll need to discuss consulting rates and terms with Charles. This is a complex recovery operation that could take several days to resolve properly." Tyler called me back an hour later. "Robert, I spoke with Uncle Charles and he's authorized me to ask about your consulting rates for helping us resolve this situation. My emergency consulting rate is $250 per hour, with a minimum commitment of 8 hours per day and immediate payment terms." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Robert, $250 an hour seems really expensive. That's way more than your salary was." "Tyler, my salary was for routine operational management. Emergency system recovery during a production crisis is a different service entirely, especially when it involves correcting problems that shouldn't have happened in the first place. How long do you think it would take to fix everything?" "That depends on the extent of the data corruption and how many systems were affected by your optimizations. It could take anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks. We need this fixed immediately." Our production lines are starting to shut down because they can't get accurate parts availability data. Then you need someone with extensive experience in our operational systems. That's me, at consulting rates. Uncle Charles said to tell you that we accept your terms. How quickly can you get here? I can be there this afternoon, but Tyler, I'll need a formal consulting contract before I begin work. I'm not doing this on a handshake.
I arrived at Hartfield Manufacturing that afternoon with a consulting contract I had drafted during lunch. The terms were clear: $250 per hour for system recovery services, minimum 8 hours per day, and payment within 48 hours. Charles signed the contract with the expression of someone who was realizing that his cost-saving nepotism hire was becoming very expensive very quickly. The production floor was in chaos.
Tyler was at my old desk, surrounded by printouts and looking like he hadn't slept in days. The operations team was fielding angry calls from customers whose orders were delayed. The procurement team was trying to manually verify inventory levels because they couldn't trust the system data. I sat down at a terminal and began diagnosing the extent of the damage. It took me most of the afternoon to understand what Tyler had broken and develop a recovery plan. Tyler's optimizations had affected 7 different databases, corrupted 3 months of historical data, and broken integration with 4 supplier systems. He had essentially unraveled 12 years of careful system development in an attempt to improve efficiency. The recovery took me 6 days, not because the technical work was particularly difficult, but because I had to carefully rebuild data integrity while keeping production running and maintaining supplier relationships. During those 6 days, I worked in Tyler's office, the office that used to be mine, while he sat at a temporary desk in the hallway, looking increasingly embarrassed and deflated. By the following Tuesday, our systems were back to normal, our inventory data was accurate, and our suppliers had restored automatic ordering. Our production schedules were back on track, and our customers were receiving their orders on time. "Robert, thank you for getting us out of this crisis," Charles said as I finished documenting the recovery procedures and the system changes that would prevent similar issues in the future. "I have to admit, we couldn't have resolved this without your expertise." "You definitely couldn't have resolved this without my expertise, Charles. This is exactly why I recommended against this transition. About that, we were wondering if you might be willing to extend your consulting arrangement. Tyler is clearly going to need more training and support than we initially anticipated. I had been expecting this conversation. I'd be open to discussing a longer-term consulting arrangement, but my rates would reflect the ongoing nature of the work." "What kind of rates?" "For routine operational oversight and training, my rate would be $200 per hour. For emergency response like this week, $250 per hour. For system development and optimization, $225 per hour." Charles did some quick calculations, and I could see him realizing that my consulting fees would cost significantly more than my former salary. "Robert, those rates are going to add up to much more than we were paying you as an employee." "Yes, they are. But you're no longer paying for my benefits, my vacation time, my sick leave, or my office space. You're also getting the flexibility to scale my involvement based on Tyler's learning curve and the company's needs. What if we wanted to offer you your old position back?" I almost laughed. "Charles, you demoted me to make room for your nephew because you thought our operations were so simple that a recent business school graduate could manage them. You told me I deserved to rest and that Tyler would handle everything just fine. We may have underestimated the complexity of your role. You certainly underestimated something. But no, I'm not interested in returning as an employee. I am, however, happy to continue providing consulting services at the rates I've outlined. And Tyler is intelligent and motivated, but he needs extensive mentoring before he can independently manage complex operations. I'm willing to train him properly, but it's going to take months, not weeks." Over the next 4 months, I worked an average of 30 hours per week at Hartfield Manufacturing, earning significantly more than my former full-time salary, while having much greater flexibility and autonomy. I spent those months properly training Tyler on the operational complexities that couldn't be learned from textbooks or documentation. I taught him about supplier relationship management, production flow optimization, quality control procedures, and the hundreds of small decisions that keep manufacturing operations running smoothly. Tyler, to his credit, was humbled by his initial failures and became genuinely committed to learning. He stopped talking about optimizations and started asking thoughtful questions about why processes were designed the way they were. Most importantly, He began to understand that operational excellence wasn't about implementing the latest theoretical frameworks, but about understanding the practical realities of managing complex systems under constant pressure. After 6 months, Charles offered to restore my position as operations manager with a significant salary increase, but I declined. I had discovered that consulting provided better compensation, more interesting challenges, and the freedom to work with multiple companies. Tyler continued to develop under my mentoring and eventually became competent at managing day-to-day operations, though it took him over a year to develop the intuitive understanding that I had tried to transfer in 1 week. The experience taught me something important about nepotism and the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical expertise. Charles had assumed that his nephew's intelligence and education were sufficient qualifications for managing complex operations, and he had underestimated the value of experience and institutional knowledge. Most importantly, I learned that being demoted can sometimes be the best thing that happens to your career, especially when it forces you to recognize and properly value your own expertise. But here's what I want to ask you. Put yourself in my position for a moment. You've spent 12 years building operational excellence, and then you're told to step aside for the boss's nephew who has never worked in your industry. Management is confident that your role is simple enough for a recent graduate to handle immediately. What would you have done in my place? Would you have fought the demotion more aggressively? Would you have accepted the senior advisor role and tried to work within the new structure? Would you have quit immediately rather than training your replacement? Some people have told me I was vindictive, that I should have been more supportive during Tyler's transition and charged reasonable rates for emergency consulting. They say I should have been understanding about Charles's desire to bring family into the business and give his nephew opportunities to grow. But here's what I keep coming back to. Charles made a choice about my value to the organization. He decided that 12 years of operational expertise could be replaced by someone with business school credentials and family connections. He was willing to sacrifice operational stability and institutional knowledge to give his nephew a management position. And I made a choice about my own value. I chose to price my expertise at market rates rather than accepting whatever they offered. I chose to return on my terms rather than their terms. I chose to prove that operational management requires more than theoretical knowledge and good intentions. Do you think that was the right choice? Do you think there's ever a justification for replacing experienced managers with unqualified family members? I'm genuinely curious about how other people would navigate this situation. You know what really bothers me about this whole experience? It's not just that Charles was wrong about Tyler's readiness to manage operations. It's that he was so confident that nepotism was more important than competence. He thought business school education could replace 12 years of experience. He discovered it couldn't. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Charles had approached the succession planning differently. If he had wanted Tyler to learn operations, he could have hired him as my deputy and given him several years to develop under my mentoring. If he had wanted to reduce my workload, he could have discussed restructuring my responsibilities rather than replacing me entirely. Instead, he chose the path that looked like family, loyalty, and cost optimization. And he learned exactly what happens when you prioritize relationships over competence. Tyler, despite his initial arrogance and mistakes, eventually became a capable operations manager under proper guidance. But it took extensive training, multiple failures, and expensive consulting to get him there. Costs that far exceeded what it would have taken to implement a proper succession plan. The irony is that Charles got what he wanted. Tyler eventually did take over operations, but it cost much more and took much longer than if he had approached the transition professionally rather than emotionally. If this story resonates with you, if it makes you think about your own experiences with nepotism or being undervalued in favor of less qualified candidates, then maybe that's exactly what needed to happen. Maybe we all need to be reminded that expertise has value, that experience matters, and that family connections aren't substitutes for competence. What would you have done in my place? How would you have handled being demoted for the boss's unqualified nephew? Tell me in the comments. I'm genuinely curious about how other people would handle this kind of professional situation. Share this if it moved you. And remember that your own story of professional resilience and self-advocacy is still being written. You have more value than you know, and sometimes the best response to being undervalued is to prove exactly what you're worth.